Today we're doing another review of a cold steel knife. In fact, this may be one of my favorite cold steel knives. This was kind of back when I first kind of started collecting knives and these knives came out. This was one of the knives that I really had my eye on for a long time and wanted to save up to get money, save up enough money to get. Of course, as a kid, I didn't have a lot of money, so at the time, this seemed like an expensive knife. Now I realize, especially back then, cold steel was actually very affordable for the quality that you got. But you actually get probably better quality from cold steel as far as the blade materials today than you did then. So this is actually the Cold Steel Recon 1. Very familiar knife to those of you who know cold steel knives. The model that I have here today is actually an older model. It's before they upgraded some of the features, specifically the blade steel and the coating on the blade and stuff like that. But otherwise, the design is very much the same today with models you would pick up currently that they're putting out. So I just wanted to do a quick review of this knife. Basically, like I said, right off the bat, I'm kind of just leading with the fact that this is probably one of my favorite cold steel knives. This thing, as we'll get into in a little bit, it feels like it's built like a tank and it could withstand a lot of abuse. This one hasn't, obviously, as you can look at it and tell that. And I'll give a little bit of insight into that and why. But so starting out, just kind of to get some of the specs out of the way. This is a fairly large knife, especially for somebody who would want to try and use it for an EDC knife or everyday carry. It does have a 4-inch blade, so if you were to measure that blade, you're going to see that it's coming in at just, in my case, it's just under 4 inches where that's coming in. I don't know how well you can tell that, but I'm getting it actually at closer to probably 3 3/4. But it is advertised as a 4-inch blade, so maybe if they're considering that the handle has a curve here and you go all the way to that bottom edge, then you can get right at just about 4 inches if you measure from there. But as far as actual sharpened edge of the blade, you're looking at more like 3 3/4. But it's still a pretty large knife. Overall, you're looking at about 9 1/4 inches. That is not what it's advertised at either. They advertise it as just a little bit larger than that, but when I measure it, I'm getting about 9 3/4 on that. So, or 9 1/4. I apologize, 9 1/4 on that. So it's a fairly large knife. Again, as I say in pretty much every video, I have fairly large hands. You can see that's a big knife. It fills my hand. For me, it fits my hand really nice. Now, I know some people one of the issues they're going to have on that is that it's hard to choke up on this blade. You can see that you have these really deep finger grooves, which do feel, in my hands, they feel really good. I like them, but it does not allow you to get that forward finger up very high on the blade. You're kind of back off the blade. There's no choil or anything that you can choke up on. You do have a little bit of an indent here on the back with a little bit of jimping. That does allow your thumb to get good purchase on the back of the knife. It feels very secure in the hand. Part of that's going to be because of the G10 and the texture on that, which we'll also get to in a minute. But overall, fairly large knife, especially if you're using this or wanting to carry this for an everyday carry knife. I mentioned already that the handle scales are made out of G10. I like that. I like G10 handle scales. I will say that out of any knife that I've ever handled with G10 handle scales, the Recon 1 has the most aggressive texturing on their G10 that I've ever felt. Now, that being said, it feels really good in the hand. That thing's not going anywhere when you lock in on it. Great in the hand, not so great in the pocket. You put this thing in your pocket and it just destroys a pocket, and it does it very quickly. In fact, if you can see this here, I'm hoping I have enough lighting in here that you can kind of see it, but I think, yeah, maybe. There is, right from basically where the edge of this point of the clip is back, I have actually sanded that G10 down smooth. It's not even a great job. I did this a long time ago. But I sanded all that texturing off the G10 because I was literally just wearing out the pockets on my jeans in a matter of a week or two. It would just shred the pocket. This is super aggressive texturing here. And so I did have to sand that out. Now, I have to say, after I did that, it works great. I don't have any problems with it now. It doesn't tear up my pockets. And it also was actually difficult to pull out of the pocket. With all that texturing and how tight that clip was, you would be struggling just to get this thing out of your pocket, which again, if you ever wanted to carry this and you, God forbid, had to use it in a self-defense situation, which I think it would be ideally suited for, you don't want to be struggling trying to get that thing out of your pocket. So that texturing just had to come off. I took the clip off, sanded it down, put it back together, and it works a whole lot better now. It does not look as nice, but it does work a whole lot better now. This knife, basically, when I first got it and I carried it, I used to carry multiple knives on me anytime I went anywhere, and they had different functions. So this one, to be quite honest, was intended for me more as a self-defense tool. That's why I carried it, so it didn't see a lot of use. One of the things that the older models, and this is an older model, so Recon 1 actually had multiple models that have come out. The first model, I believe, actually came out, I don't remember when it was, but it was made in Japan, and it actually had I think they called it the Ultra Lock. It's almost like a Benchmade's Axis lock, where you have the little locking mechanism right here. And then instead of a thumb stud, it actually had a plate, like a thumb plate that you use to flip it open with. I never owned one of those models, but those were the first models that came out. Then they moved the production to Taiwan, which is, you can see here, that's what we have on this one here is the cold steel made in Taiwan. So I'm really having a hard time getting that thing to focus. But so this is kind of like their second model that came out. And then it did come out. You know, you've got the lock back here. I know current models have the triad lock. I believe this one actually is also the triad lock on it. It might have been one of their earlier models with it. But the thing locks up tight. It's definitely a beast. It feels like a beast in the hand. It's a somewhat heavier knife. I think current models come in at about 5.3 ounces is what they're advertising on these. But it's not too heavy. The G10 scales keep it fairly light, even though they, like I said, they are aggressive. This knife, just to give you an idea, maybe for size comparison, another knife I have on me right now that a lot of people in the knife world are familiar with is the Paramilitary 2. So you can see there, size comparison, overall length. This thing is quite a bit longer overall than the Paramilitary 2, and blade length is also probably looks like at least a good 1/4 of an inch longer on the blade length, maybe a little longer than that. But overall, it's larger than the Paramilitary 2, which is not a small knife in and of its own, right? So it is a larger knife, like I said. Now, I will say that current models, the upgrades I've mentioned, there are a couple upgrades to current models if you get them. This model actually still came with Cold Steel's AUS 8 steel, which is, Cold Steel had the best AUS 8 you could get, but even the best AUS 8 is still not a great knife steel. It's an okay knife steel at best. So definitely one of the things that I may one of these days do is actually just buy a newer model of the Recon 1. I do really like the knife. Having what they come out with now, which is the S35 VN, is a much better steel. S35 VN, for those of you who might not be aware, is kind of like the natural follow-up to S30 V, so it's just a little less prone to chipping and stuff than the S30 V was, but otherwise fairly similar. It's a good steel, kind of good top tier of the mid-range steel. So I think the upgraded steel is a big selling point if you can pick one up now. The other thing that they upgraded is the coating on the blade. They now have the DLC coating on the blade, which is going to wear much better. This thing basically, I believe they actually called it a silicone coating, or no, it wasn't silicone, it was Teflon. I got those two mixed up. Teflon coating, I believe, is what they called this. And basically, from what I can tell, it's just paint. It's black paint. It does not hold up well at all. This thing has seen again, I carried it for self-defense, and thankfully I never had to use it for self-defense. So it's really seen no use at all, and other than just being carried in a pocket. And you can see that there's already spots where the paint has kind of started to chip off and flake off just a little bit. Not real bad, but again, that's with no use at all. That's just being carried in a pocket. It's the same kind of paint or whatever I think that's on the belt clip, which also has some wear on it. I mean, that's natural on a belt clip. You would assume that you're going to get that, so that doesn't really bother me at all. But just be aware that that is the case. On these older ones, the coating's not as good. They do have the DLC coating on the new ones, which is a lot better. So that's an upgrade as well. Of course, you get the triad lock on the modern ones if you pick one of those up. Your belt clip is not deep carry, even on the new models. This is the same kind of belt clip that they're going to have. So what you see there is what you get. It is definitely not a deep carry model pocket clip by any means. So, you know, if that's something that really bothers you, I guess you could always probably buy another clip and replace it. It is reversible for left or right side of the knife, but it is not reversible for tip up, tip down. This is only a tip up carry knife. So you're not going to have that option if that's a big deal to you. Now, this knife, like I said, it was one that I had kind of had my eye on as a kid, and I wanted to get this thing. The kind of predecessor to this was actually another cold steel knife that I actually got from my uncle as a gift, and I absolutely loved the look and feel of this knife as well, and that is the old Cold Steel Night Force. I believe they have a newer model out now that actually looks nothing like this, and they had a long time where this model just didn't exist. The Night Force didn't exist, but this was an older model Night Force. I got this knife. I really liked it, but I just really wanted to upgrade to that Recon 1. And I think that with the liner lock on this Night Force, and it has their synthetic, almost like plasticky type scales here, Zytel or Zytel or whatever they called that, and not the G10. So there is some upgrades there between the two knives. I really like this knife as well, but I carried it for the same purpose. So again, this one didn't see much use either. You see the same kind of chipping and flaking in that Teflon coating, I think is what they called it. So they are very similar knives, but I do like the Recon 1. So that being said, right now you can pick up the Recon 1. There are several different options as far as blade style. You can pick this up in the clip point like what I have here. I've always favored clip point knives. I just like the look of them. So that was an automatic for me. You can pick it up in the clip point. You can pick it up in a spear point, and you can also pick it up in a Tonto point. And for those of you who are out there in the knife community and you're going to try and correct my pronunciation on that, if it makes you feel better, I'll call it a Tanto. But my understanding is that it is a Japanese word and it would be pronounced Tonto in Japanese, at least the best I can pronounce it. So you can pick it up with any of those 3 points, the clip point, the Tonto, or the spear point option. If you like a different blade style, that is something that I like that the Recon 1 gives you, is some options. You can get the same knife but with different blade styles in case you tend to favor one over another. So something like the knife I just put on the table, that Paramilitary 2, traditionally has only ever had one blade style. Now I know there have been some people who correct me and say there's been some exclusive sprint run type models. They actually had a Tonto point, I believe, on it at one point, and maybe also like a Warncliffe style blade on that. But for the most part, traditionally, if you go out right now and you want to buy a Paramilitary 2, the only option you have is that traditional blade style. The Recon 1, you've pretty much always had these 3 styles that you can select from, and so I like that. Again, as far as what this thing, is it worth the money? You know, back when I bought this knife, I think I got it for about $50 with the AUS 8 steel in it. $50, yeah, it was worth it. It's definitely a very well built. Everything is fit and function wise is really good. It doesn't have super slick opening on any kind of ball bearing action, pivot, or anything, but you can open it one handed with no problem, and it just slams into place, locks up tight with that triad lock. Super sharp from the factory. I got this before Cold Steel started having the issues with their grinds being all off and out of kilter, off whack. So this had good grinds on it. Extremely sharp knife. Like I said, feels great in the hand. The only downside really was the way it tore up my pockets. Love this knife. So right now, though, if you buy it, you're getting upgraded steel, but that also comes with an upgraded price point. So these knives obviously are not around the $50 mark anymore. In fact, you're pretty lucky if you can pick one of these up for right around the $100 mark. Most of the time, you're going to be spending more like $125, $130 for one of these knives. But I still think, all things considered, if you're a fan of Cold Steel, you're a fan of a heavy-duty pocket knife that can handle a lot of abuse, you know, in any given situation, should it be called upon to do so, the Recon 1 is just a great choice. And even at that price point, you're getting that upgraded S35V in steel. I highly recommend it. If you're a fan of Cold Steel and you don't have a Recon 1, then you've done yourself a disservice. You need to go out and get one. It's a great knife. It feels great in the hand. Like I said, the only thing that I would just give you a little warning on, I hated doing it. I like my knives to be pristine as long as possible, but I did have to sand that down. It just was destroying jeans left and right, and I couldn't afford to keep replacing my jeans, so instead I just sanded the knife down behind the belt clip, and it just works so much better that way. Honestly, I wish from the factory they would just smooth that section on the knife out, leave that G10 smooth. There's no reason that you need to have the grip there because you're locking in up higher on with the grip. You've already got the belt clip there, so that's covering that area anyway. It just would be a nice feature if they would smooth that out, at least under the belt clip area. But all that being said, love the Recon 1. Great, heavy duty, beefy knife for EDC if you want to do that, or for those specific, whatever specific task you might have in mind. If you're really going to have to be putting some abuse on a knife, love the Recon 1. Highly recommend, even at the price point, especially now that they have that better grade steel, that S30 5VN in there. I would recommend that you pick one up if you get the chance.